Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to Wix Wiz. Today's tutorial will be about the very much requested AI image generator, and we'll be creating it using Wix and the OpenAI API in the backend. And this is essentially going to be a DALL-E 2 or Midjourney clone. And this tutorial will focus on three different things that the OpenAI API offers. The first one is creating an image from a prompt. So you give a prompt and you generate an AI generated image from that text prompt. The second thing will be an image variant. So we supplied the image here on the left, and then the AI generated the image here on the right. So similar topic, but different image. And last but not least, we will be talking about editing an image with a mask and a prompt. So we gave the image here on the left. We provided a mask with a transparent area, which is where we want to make the changes. And we gave a prompt with the changes we want to make. And the AI generated this image here on the right. I invite you to check out this template, which I will be linking to in the description below, as well as some of the API documentation and relevant Wix Velo documentation. And if you want, I will be offering this template for sale as well for people who either want to just check out the backend code or to actually use this in your very own projects. So without further ado, let's get started. So a few prerequisites that you're going to want to have ready before getting started with this tutorial. First of all, of course, a Wix website. It could be either in the classic editor or in Editor X. I personally am using Editor X, but the same principles explained in this tutorial can be applied to either. Make sure that you have dev mode on so that you have access to the code panels and so that you can save your API key to the secrets manager. I am not going to explain how to do that in this tutorial, but if you want more in-depth explanations about external API setup and the secrets manager, you can check out my general external API tutorial or the Chatbot AI tutorial, which is specific to the OpenAI API. The API key I got from over here, which is my OpenAI account, which is something else that you're going to need to set up before getting started with this tutorial. You should get 3 months free and $18 worth of tokens when you set up your account for the first time. Two more things I recommend having open as you work. One is the API documentation, which is built mostly in two parts. So the first part is we have the guides, which are more explanatory and kind of walk you through how to implement the API. And we have the API reference, which is more technical documentation, though the guides also include some of the technical documentation. And today we'll mostly be using the guide. And the guide that we're going to be using is the image generation guide, because that is what this tutorial is all about. The second thing I recommend you have open is your Wix Velo reference, where all of the Wix-related APIs are mentioned, and this will be used in some of the later parts of our tutorial for some of the more complex elements of this tutorial. Now that we have everything set up, we can go ahead and start implementing the image generation API. And in this tutorial, we'll be covering the three capabilities that this API has, which are also listed here in the API documentation. The first is to create a brand new image from scratch based on a text prompt. The second is to make an edit of an existing image. And the third is to create a variation on an existing image. So let's go ahead and start with number one, creating an image from scratch based on a text prompt. And here we have a demonstration. And in this tutorial, we're going to be using the OpenAI NPM package, as opposed to the previous tutorial, if you saw it, about the Chatbot AI, where we used the plain native JavaScript API calls. So here we're going to be using a package. And in order to do this, we are going to need to install this OpenAI NPM package on our website. So let's first head over to our website and go right over here to Packages and Apps. And then I'm going to install packages from NPM. And I'm going to search for the OpenAI NPM package. I'm going to go ahead and click Install. And as soon as that is done, we can start to use it in our code. So as soon as you see View here, then you're good. And now let's head over to our backend code. And I'm going to create a new web module. And I'm just going to call it OpenAI. And this is where we're going to be writing the functions that will be calling the actual API. And this is to keep our API key nice and secure. And we're only going to pass necessary information to the front end. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit as we write code. Let me close. Maybe I should close that first. Go ahead and close that and zoom in a little bit. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is create a function. So I'm going to go ahead and create a function called generate image from prompt, I'm going to call it. And here it's going to take a parameter, which will be the prompt, and it is going to return an image at the end. This is, of course, going to be an asynchronous function because we are going to be using, we're going to be calling an external API. There's something that's going to take time here, and there's going to be promises involved. And this I spelled wrong, of course, prompt. Excellent. The next thing we're going to do is go back to our documentation and use this boilerplate code in order to prep our function for actually generating an image. And in order to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and click copy and go right back over to our editor and paste this within the function that we just created. Then I'm going to format it, and you'll see already that we have some nice little red squiggly lines popping up. And that is because we have not yet configured our OpenAI package. So we installed the package using NPM, but we haven't set it up yet. And that's why we have this first error over here. So let's start with dealing with that. So I'm going to zoom out for a second and head back to our code panel and look for packages and apps and open the NPM package where it shows us how to configure the OpenAI package. And first there's details about how to install it, which we've already done. And here you can see the instructions for configuration. So what they have here is first extracting certain functions from the package, then setting up a configuration with the OpenAI API key. And then finally, they show a demonstration of how to use the completion API. Since we're not using the completion API, we can just copy these first 3 lines over here and head back to our code. Right over here. And paste that for now right here outside of our package. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to move these 2 parts into our function. So I'm going to put those right over here. And the reason I'm doing that is primarily because we are going to be getting our API key using the secrets manager and not what they have here, which is process.m. That's a different way for getting environment variables that is not relevant to Wix. So first of all, let me zoom right back in here. And I'm going to import get secret from Wix secrets backend. And we're going to use that over here to get our API key. So I'm going to say const API key is equal to await, because it's a promise, get secret. And if you don't remember what you call your secret, you can go back to the secrets manager and just copy the name right over here and paste that as a string inside of the get secret function. Then for here, instead of this process.env, I'm just going to switch this out for that. Okay, so essentially it's API key API key, same thing, and we could just write it like that to simplify it. And then we have our OpenAI configuration set up, and you can see here that our red squiggly lines from over here are all gone. So that's one down. This over here is just not being declared as a variable. So I'm going to say const image URL, and I'm just going to change the wording here a little bit. So it's a little more fit for how we've been writing out our variable names. And I'm going to return that URL from the function. So now let's run through and talk about what's actually going on here. So we have the OpenAI package, and what that's doing is it has a method inside called createImage, which is essentially some backend functions that call the API. And these are the body or the parameters that we pass to the API. So the first one is a prompt. And instead of a white Siamese cat, I'm just going to change that to actually be the prompt that we're passing over here to our function. N1. So if we head over to the documentation, you can see that we can request 1 to 10 images at a time using the N parameter. So that's just here, it's one image. And this is something that we might change later on, or we might let the user decide. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at 1. And the last thing, which is size, is the size of the image. As you can see, these are all square images, which will be relevant when I show you some stuff on the front end. And there's 3 options of sizes. I'm going to go for the middle size here, the 512 by 512, just so that hopefully this will be a little faster to generate. As it says here, smaller sizes are faster to generate. You can, again, choose the size that fits your use case or let the user choose. Then I'm going to go ahead back to the editor and just paste this new size right over here. And now that we have all of that set up, I'm just going to add the export keyword right over here. And this will allow us 2 things. One is to use this function in the front end of our website. And the second thing will be to test this function in the back end of our website. So I'm going to go right over here and I'm going to click play to do some testing. And you saw some error messages from when I was trying this out by myself before. And you can also see a prompt that I set up here in order to test this out. So I'm just going to go ahead and click run. And hopefully this should return a URL. Boom. Okay, so here we have a URL that it returned. And I'm going to take this URL and I'm going to paste it in my browser. And as you can see here, we have a beautiful, the mustache isn't green so much, but there is some green involved here. There is a wizard here. There is a website here. So not so bad for the AI. I think it deserves a round of applause. And basically, this is the URL that we're going to pass back to our front end in order to present it to the user. So let's do that right now. So I'm going to head back to my website. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I am going to minimize this right over here. And here you can see the front end of our website where I set up a few elements already. So we have a text box over here for an input. We have a button that says generate, and we have an image where we're going to display the image that comes back. So let's go ahead and program this so that it actually works. So let's go into the Velo code of this specific page. And first, I'm going to deal with the naming. So for this box, I'm going to call it prompt input. And I'm just changing the IDs right over here, prompt input. I'm going to change the name of the button to generate button. I have right over here a Lottie animation that I added, which is going to be used as a loading animation. Excuse my spelling. And then right here, we have our image display. Let's call it, again, the names you can make up for yourself. And now we can write some code. So let's think about what we want to do. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So all of this is going to be happening when we click our generate button. So we're going to have a generate button dot on click event. And once we click, we're going to run another function that I'm going to be writing up here, which is going to be called generate image. And this is going to be an async function because we're going to be calling the function from the backend that calls our API. And in order to do that, we are going to need to import that function from the backend. So I'm going to go ahead here and import. And good luck to me if I can remember what our function was called. Let me zoom out a little bit. So here in the OpenAI, generate image from prompt, back to the home page, zoom back in. So import generate image from prompt from backend / OpenAI. And here we are going to say const prompt equals to the value of our prompt input. That value. We have a problem. Minimize. Okay, so I accidentally called this entire stack, I think, prompt input instead of just this text box. So let's go ahead and remedy that. I'm just going to say this is going to be random box because I don't really care what this is. And what I actually wanted to name prompt input was this text box right over here. Make sure that's what I have selected. And text box element, so we're good. And this will be prompt input. Excellent. And now it has a value. Perfect. And then I'm going to say const image URL is going to be equal to await generate image from prompt, and I'm going to pass the prompt in over here. Then what we want to do is we want to actually change the source of the image display to that URL. So image URL, and I'm going to show it. So the image will be hidden beforehand, and then I'm going to show it. Show. Excellent. Two more things that I want to do. First, let's make sure that our image is actually hidden. So if I click over here, image display, you can see that it's checkmark hidden, which is great. And the next thing I want to do is to display our loading animation. So I'm going to say here loading animation .show. And then here we're going to have loading animation .hide. Let's just make sure that our loading animation is actually hidden. Hidden. Excellent. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass this generate image function to the onClick event listener over here. So generate image. And this should be enough to get our website working. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that and zoom out a little bit and head into preview mode. You could also publish your site and check it out on the live site. And let's think, what do I want an image of? A person that is really happy because their API worked. And we'll generate the image, and you can see here the Lottie animation. It's kind of covering my button here, so that's not so great. I should probably move that over. And it showed our image, but it did not show the Okay, so there was a slight delay, but here is this person that is super happy because their API worked. And why did it display the image before? See, I don't have, do I have any errors here in the console? I don't have any errors. I'm trying to think why that might have happened. Possibly because I'm in the editor. Let's try this out on our live site. So I'm going to go ahead and publish, and I'm going to click View Site. Person using Wix for the first time. And of course, I'm having a lot of fun here, which is the whole point of these image generator APIs. AI. And it does show the image before. Okay, this one is pretty amusing. I think I could just make a video just about different AI images. That would be very interesting. We'll wick. Okay, why is it showing the image beforehand? That is a good question. So after doing some playing around and debugging and really just experimenting with different options, I have changed the display image to be from hidden to collapsed. And here inside of our code, if I just zoom in a little bit, you'll see that instead of showing the image display after the source has been set to our image URL, I expand it. And let's just check that out, and you'll see that this actually works a lot better. I'm not sure why. It has probably something to do with the inner workings of Wix and the difference between hide and collapse. So let's go over here into preview mode. And I'm going to ask it to generate an image. Draw me a Velo master. Let's see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and generate that. And apparently Velo masters like bicycles, but as you can see, the image appeared only after our AI generated image was returned to us, and we didn't see the default image that I had here on the website beforehand. So now it seems to be working, and we can move on to the next step of the tutorial. So we are now finished building out number 1, which was creating images from scratch based on a text prompt. And for this next part of the tutorial, we are going to be skipping to number 3. And that is because I think that in terms of complexity, 3 comes after 1, and then 2 here would probably be the most complex. But let me warn you that 3 is significantly more complex than 1. So if you're just here to have fun, then I would just stick with 1. But if you want to challenge yourself and do something even cooler, then you can come along for the journey for number 3, which will be creating variations of an existing image. So let's scroll down to the documentation for that part and see what we have here. So for variations, you can see that you upload a certain image, and then it gives you an output, which is a variation on that. So we still have a cat and a dog, but they look different. And in terms of the API, we are going to still be using the Node.js version. And let's go ahead and just copy over the code from right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that right over and go to our website, backend code, and we can start building out a new function which will be used for variation. So let me zoom in here a little bit. And I am going to create a new function for our variance. So let's say const generate variant. And then this will also be an async function. And inside of this function, I will paste the code snippet that we copied over, which is not a Loom video, but it's actually this snippet from right over here. So let me just copy that again and paste it right over here. So let's start dealing with some of the red squiggly lines that we got here. And first of all, the OpenAI, so that we know how to deal with. And we just need to copy over our API key and our configuration here from the first function. We'll just get that right in over there, and that dealt with that. The next thing that we have is this fs.createStream. And this is actually quite fundamental because this has to do with how we are going to provide this image that we are going to be generating the variant for. And here, in this case, they are assuming that this is an image that we have stored somewhere inside of the file system that we are running this function in. But unfortunately, when it comes to Wix, we don't really have so much transparency in terms of how the files are stored and how to access them using the regular filing system. So we are going to be providing these files as URLs. And if we head back over to the documentation, then scroll down a little bit, when we come to language-specific tips, we have something here about using in-memory image data and using a Node.js buffer. I am not going to go very much in depth into buffers and what they mean here by in-memory, but basically, instead of providing a path to a file, we are going to be providing the raw image data, binary data. And in order to do this, we are actually going to need to use another package or another library called Axios. And this is going to be used to fetch our image from a URL in a binary form. And we can't do this, unfortunately, using Wix fetch because it's just not built into their system. So let's go ahead and start implementing that. So I'm going to copy, first of all, this code over here, because this is what we're going to be working with and not exactly what I copied over from before. So let's go ahead and copy that. And I'm going to replace what we have over here with this buffer setup. And obviously there's some stuff here which isn't quite set up yet, but this is our boilerplate code that we're going to be working with. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm just going to zoom out a bit and head over to our npm packages and install Axios. And Axios is a library which, similar to fetch or request or stuff like that, it can call APIs, it can make calls to URLs and get the data from them. So I'm just going to search here for Axios. It just simplifies some of the process. If you want the official terminology, it's a promise-based HTTP client for the browser and Node.js. They're much more eloquent than what I said. So I'm just going to copy over this line, which will help us import Axios to our project. Now that I see that this install has been complete, I'm just going to copy this line over and paste it right up here on top in the line with all of our imports. Now what we're going to need is a URL to an image that we are going to be fetching the image data from. So what I've done is, if you take a look here at my media, I've uploaded one of the AI generated images from the first part of the tutorial. And we're going to be using this image to start with. Obviously, in the end result, we are going to want to let the user upload their own image, but just to make sure that our backend function is working correctly, we're going to start with an image that I have pre-uploaded to my Wix site. So I'm going to go to our media files and I'm going to get the URL. So copy URL, and this will be a URL to the image that we can use to fetch the image data. So I'm just going to declare this as a constant within my function. So I'm going to say const image URL, and that is just going to be a string with the URL to the image. And if you would put this in the browser, you would just see the image in your browser. Next, we need to use Axios to fetch this image. And in order to do that, I am just going to paste in 2 lines of code right over here. And now I will explain what they mean. So let's just zoom in a little bit. And first we have fetching using Axios. So Axios uses a slightly different terminology than fetch. So with fetch, we'd have a URL and we'd have options. So with Axios, our method is defined here. So axios.get. And here, image URL, this is the URL that we are fetching the image from. And this is really the key, and the reason that we're using Axios here is that we want the response type to be array buffer. And this will basically let us use the data in the way that we want and pass it to the OpenAI API in a way that it can understand. The next thing that we have here is that we generate a buffer from the data that comes back from our call to this URL. And so that's buffer.from image.data. Again, I'm not going very much in depth here into what each of these things mean. This is going to be a slight leap of faith on your part. And the reason that we have this error here is because I am declaring buffer twice, so we can get rid of this here. And we'll just get rid of the instructions that we have over here. And last but not least, here we say buffer.name equals image.png, and that's because here we are told that we should set a name that ends with PNG so the API knows it's a PNG image. And even though it is throwing an error over here, we're going to leave it as is, because if we don't do that, then the API won't work. So that's why we're leaving it. And last but not least, I'm just going to change the size of the image again to be 512 by 512. And here we're passing in this buffer. So instead of that read data stream or whatever you saw before, we're passing in the buffer, which is the data of the image. We're telling it that we only want one image, and we're telling it the size. It's interesting here that here we had to say, here it was shaped as a object, but here it's kind of just passed in as 3 parameters to this function. Possibly, I just want to double check over here inside of the variations. Yeah, so here it's just passed in as 3 parameters. Interesting choice in terms of the API design, but sure, just follow the rules. And here I'm just going to say, like we did before, const image URL. And, oh, so I should probably change this. Image URL, let's say response image URL. Again, naming is an art and requires practice, and I might have changed this if I was doing this by myself. So let's see, response image URL, and moment of truth. Let's give it a try. So I'm just going to add the export keyword over here so that we can test it in the back end, and give it a run. So I'm going to hit over here, run. I know you can't see it says run there, but it does, believe me. And our API is being called. And this takes some time because it needs to turn it into a buffer and make the API call, but you can see that we were returned here with a URL. And if I take this URL and I put it over here in the browser, then we can see that we got back another very cool wizard image. Maybe I should make this the thumbnail for my channel instead of what I have now. But this is a variant on the image that we had before. Okay, so it's still a green related wizard with something with a website, but it's a completely different image. Okay, so we know that our backend function is working. And now we can work on the front end, which will be letting the user upload the image and sending it to the backend. So I'm just going to make one last change to the backend, which will be, let me zoom out, to change this image URL from an image URL that I determined in advance to an image URL that is passed in as a parameter to the function, because we're going to be passing that in from the front end. So let's head over to the front end of the site. So I'm going to go here to the code for the home page, and you'll see over here I have added a new section. Just going to zoom out a little more. I have added a new section, and this section has several things on it. It has 2 images, and it has an upload button. And what I'm going to do is one image will be used to display the image that is uploaded, and the second image will be used to display the image that is generated by the API. And to do this, I'm going to need to add one more button, which will initiate the API call. So let's put that over there. And now for the naming fun, so this will be generate. Generate. I hope I spelled that right. Don't make fun of me. And here I'm going to change the name of this image to original image, and this will be AI variant variant image, and this will be our upload image button, and this will be our generate variant button. Okay, excellent. Now we can just dive deep into our code. So I'm going to zoom in. And the first thing that I want to deal with is the upload button. So for that, we're going to take a look at the Velo API. And we're going to be using the upload files Velo API. And let's take a look at this. So my upload files, and then for each file, we can do something with the file URL. Let me just double check that we don't want to use this start upload. Okay, depreciated. Use upload files instead. Okay, that's why I was a little confused, because this looked a little familiar to me, but I guess that's the depreciated one. And let's just copy over this code right over here and paste it over here. So first of all, I'm going to change this to the name of our upload button, which is generate, sorry, not variant button, but upload image button. And here we are initiating the upload files, but we only want to do this actually once the user has uploaded their file to the upload button. So the way this button works, it's two-staged. First, the user will select an image from their computer, and then this image is still not uploaded to Wix yet. It's kind of in an interim stage where the button knows that the image has been selected, but it's still not uploaded to the server. And then at that point, we want to call these upload files, and then we can upload the image to the server and also pass that uploaded URL to the to our API. So we're only going to do this when our upload image button dot on change. Okay, so we're adding a change event listener, and this change event listener will be fired when we select a new file from our computer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function over here. So I'm going to say const, am I zoomed in enough? Zoom in one more. Const upload image to Wix Media. And inside of here, I will be putting all of this. And this is what we're going to call when we change the image. Okay, so far looks pretty good. So now I just want to give it a whirl actually and see if this works simply as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out, and we already have a console in here, so this should really help us check if everything is working here. And I want to add one more console actually, which will just be uploaded files. No, uploaded file. Okay, so this is finding uploaded file URL, but I actually want to see this entire object that comes back to us because there might be some valuable information there that we might need for future parts of this tutorial. And let's head into preview mode to check this out. So now that I'm in preview mode, I'm going to go ahead and select a file from my computer. I know you can't see me selecting, but believe me that I am. And you can see here that the file has been uploaded to our server. And this only happened because we had added the additional code. If we had not added the additional code, this would not have been directly uploaded to our Wix Media. It would have just, you would have seen this image had been selected, but there would be nothing uploading it. Now that we have uploaded it to Wix Media, we got back our file URL. We also got back the upload object. And here I don't actually see anything that can help us beyond the file URL, but sometimes it's worth just seeing the entirety of what you're getting back. And if I take here the file URL and I head over to our browser, let's just see what I can see if I put this URL in. And it runs some Google searches of retrieving a URL of an image in the Wix editor, but unfortunately it doesn't show us the actual image. And that's what we are going to need to pass to the API. So this is because this URL of the image is more of an internal URL. And what we need is to use another part of the Velo API, which is get download URL. And this is going to be a URL that can actually be viewed or downloaded. And this is what we're going to want to pass to our API. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy over this boilerplate code. And I'm going to head back to the editor and head back into edit mode. Now, let's just paste this code right above our function. And I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can start seeing what I'm doing. So first of all, we have an import here. So I'm going to take that import and put it at top level. And you might need to zoom out a little bit in order to do that. And as I'm doing this, I'm noticing that I might have made a slight mistake because I have export async function here. And if I just check the documentation one more time, I might see that this is something that needs to be done in the back end. Let me check that out. Wix Media backend. Okay, so you see this is Wix Media backend. So this is something we're only going to be able to do in the backend of our website, which is actually okay because we can just incorporate this as part of our backend function, which actually gets the variants. So let's go ahead and go back to our editor. And I'm just going to Control Z here and get rid of what we just copied over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the generate, what did I call this function? The generate variant function from our backend. So generate variant. And I'm going to call that function and I'm going to pass it this file URL that we got, even though this is not the final URL that we are going to be using in the backend function. So I'm going to say generate variant equals, and this is going to be await. So I'm going to need to change this to an async function. And let me just zoom in a bit to make sure you can see what I'm doing. Equals await. Sorry, what am I doing? Const image URL equals await generate variant. And here I'm going to pass uploaded file file URL. And the async needs to be over here. No, it needs to be for each. Here. Get rid of the async over here. For each. This I'm going to need to wrap in parentheses. Async over here. Okay. Yeah. So we're running an async inside of for each. Not ideal, but I think it should work. And then let's console.log image URL. And there are still some changes that we need to make on the back end. So let's zoom out over here. And I'm going to head here to our backend. And here I'm going to be pasting our code, which generates the, let's copy that over again from right over here. And I'm going to paste the code, which generates the downloadable URL file. So I'm going to go ahead and move this import to top level. So I'm going to go right over here and zoom out just a little bit and put that right over there. Okay, so I moved our import up. And here we have an async function of get downloadable URL function. So I'm just going to say get downloadable URL. And then what we need to do here is, this is not going to be our image URL, but this is going to be the file URL. And our image URL will be equal to await get downloadable URL. And here we are going to have our file URL. Okay, so API.download file. Okay, I think that this should work. I'm not 100% sure, but let's give it a spin. And here I'm just going to console.log image URL. And we're going to be checking this in our backend logs. Just to recap what we did here. So I incorporated the get downloadable URL function in the backend of my Wix site, where I have the API calling functions. And when we call the get variant function, we actually pass it the file URL that I showed you before that comes back from the upload on the front end, which isn't the final version that we can actually use in the API. So we pass that into the function that gets the downloadable URL, and then hopefully that should be the image URL that we need in order to get the buffer and upload it to the API. So let's go ahead and give this a try. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit and go back into preview mode. And you can see here that in the back end, I will clear this, and now I have my logs here. So I'm ready to see any back-end logs that might be causing us issues. And I'm going to go ahead and upload a file. And it's going to be this same image file that we did before. And okay, the process has begun. Boom, okay. And let's see, so I have the file URL, I have the image URL, and we have our API call over here. Excellent, so this worked perfectly, and I might let myself say. And you can see here that we have yet another variant, which is awesome and cool. And so we can just add the last piece to our puzzle, which is to display this new image that came back. So let's go back to edit site. And actually, we also still haven't dealt with displaying our original image as well. So that's what we're going to be doing here now. So let's go ahead and do some refactoring over here, because it's not working 100% like we want, even though we know it will. So let's first, I zoomed in a little too much, too early. First, I'm going to declare a global variable, and I'm going to say, I'm going to call that, what should I call it? Let's call it file URL. I'm also going to, that should be enough for us for now. And then I'm going to say, here I'm going to say file URL is equal to uploaded file dot file URL. And the reason I'm doing that is because I actually don't want to call this here. We only want to call this when the person clicks that generate button. So I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to be adding another event listener down here. I think now it's safe to zoom back in. It's ironic that editor X is not very responsive when it comes to zooming in and zooming out. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say generate button dot on click. And this I'm just going to put the callback function in here, and it's going to be async. You can actually get rid of the async over here because we don't need it anymore. And we don't need a console uploaded file. And here, instead of passing uploaded file, I'm actually going to pass this file URL, okay, which is our global variant, which we declared before, if you remember. And that was the reason so that we can pass it in between these unrelated functions. Now we just need to add a little bit of the smoke and mirrors. So what I'm going to do, let's see. So I want to display, let's see if I can use this file URL to display a Wix image. Let's see. So I'm going to say original image dot source will be equal to file URL. And I'm going to say that after we have finished uploading our original file, then I will say generate button dot enable. I'm going to go ahead and disable that momentarily. And after we generate our new image, then let's say that what did I call it? Variant. AI variant image dot source is equal to image URL. And let's remember to expand that as well because it's collapsed. So variant AI variant image dot expand. And we have to remember to expand this image as well. So original image dot expand. Excellent. And the last thing I'm going to do, just zoom out. And I'm going to disable this generate button initially so that we can only generate once we actually have uploaded an image. Otherwise, we'll run into some issues. So let's head over into preview mode. And I'm going to start by selecting a file. So I'm going to go ahead, same image file that we've been using until now. And yes, okay, so because this is a Wix element on a Wix website, this element can interpret that original URL, which we tried to put in the browser, but it didn't work for us. And that's just because we're within the Wix system. Okay, so this is good. We got that over there. But for some reason, my generate button did not enable, which is not good because now we can't generate the AI image. So let me take a look at that. Generate button dot enable. Original image dot expand, generate button dot enable. That should have worked. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it enabled by default. And that is because, generate variant button. What did I do here? Generate button. Okay. Okay, yeah, as usual, a bug that has to do more with typos than anything else. So let's head back into preview mode. and I'm going to upload the file again. Excellent, so we have our original image over here, and I'm going to click Generate. And soon we should be able to see our new file over here on the right if everything goes smoothly. And this is something that could take time, but I think that that's a little too much time judging by how long it took the first time around. So let's add some consoles in just to do some debugging. So, okay, we had console.log here for image URL. So I guess our image URL wasn't returning. Let's see if we have any errors in our log. No, I don't see any errors over there. So what I want to do is I want to first console.log file URL to make sure that we're passing in the right file URL over here. And here I'll add a console for image URL, image URL. Adding the console, sorry, but just naming the console, the log over here. And let's give it another try. So I'm going to head into preview mode. And upload our image. And generate. Okay, I think I know what the issue is now. It's that I made the same typo twice. So let's change this back over here. And fourth time's the charm. What do they say? Fifth time. Choose a file. Got the file over here. Click generate. Okay, file URL image came back. And I don't see it displaying. Ah, here it is. Ta-da! And that concludes the second part of our tutorial where we created an image variant. And as I promised you, this was much more challenging. If you've stayed on this long, great job. This would be a great time to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And remember that if you are struggling, I will be offering a template of the final version that we're building here in this tutorial for sale with all the code. So if you want to purchase it and either use it for your own uses, have a copy of the code just to go over it yourself, then that will be available. And with that, we'll be moving on to the third part of the tutorial, which will be edits. Welcome to the third part of the tutorial where we'll be tackling the second capability of the image generation API, and that is to create edits of an existing image based on a new text prompt. And as I said, this will be a step up from the already challenging creating variations of an existing image. So let's scroll down and check out the guide. And we can see here that for the image edits, we are given an example where we have an original image. We have a mask, which is an image for which part of the image is transparent. And then our output, which is defined by a prompt that we pass in addition to the images. Then the guide goes and elaborates, and it clarifies that the image and the mask must be PNG, and they must both be square. And the non-transparent area of the mask is not important. So if you take a look at the mask here, you can see they're kind of using the same image, but just some part of it is transparent, but that's not necessary. So this mask could be a completely black image, like will be, or white, or any other color, or just another image. And just the important part is that there is some transparent part. Another important thing, which I don't see here in the guide, but is mentioned in the actual documentation. So let's take a look at it over here. If we go to images and we go down to create image edit, then we can see here that an image is required, but a mask is optional. And if the mask is not provided, the image must have transparency. Okay, so there are basically two options here. Either you can upload an image which has some transparent part, and then the prompt will refer to that, or you can upload an image with a mask. So we're going to try and show both things here. And as I said, this will be a slight challenge, a slight level up from what we did in part 2. So in order to get started, let's head back to the guide, image generation. And we're actually going to be using a lot of the techniques that we used in the image variant part. So if you skipped over it, you might want to go back and check that out again. And basically, we're going to be using this language-specific stuff with the buffer. The only difference is that here we're going to need the ability to pass in 2 images. But to keep things rather simple, we're going to start off by just doing the version where we don't have a mask. So let's go over, and I'm just going to copy this boilerplate code, head over to editor X, and I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to call it edit image, being very original, async, and we have a function. And let me just zoom in a little bit here so you can see a little better. And here I'm going to be pasting the boilerplate code that we copied over. And let's see what we can utilize from our generate variant function in order to get this working. So here we have the API key, and the configuration. So I'm going to copy that over as well. At some point, we're going to need to use our get downloadable URL when we're dealing with the front end part of this. But for now, since we're only doing some testing in the back end, I am just going to leave that out. And we are going to still need our buffer. So I'm going to copy over all this information here and paste it right over here above our response. And here you can see that we don't have an image URL, so I'm going to pass that in as a parameter right over here. And this, as we said before, it throws an error here, but actually it does work, so we're going to ignore that. And here, instead of our original image and our mask, I'm just going to pass in the buffer. Because again, we are just going to try it originally with an image that has partial transparency and not deal with the mask at this moment. But let's just throw in here a line that would say mask, just so we don't forget it in the future. So I'm just going to put a comment over here for mask. Then we have our prompt. So the prompt I'm also going to pass in here as a parameter so that we are a little flexible with that. And I'm going to go and change this to prompt. And then we still want to get one image back, but we want it to be 512 by 512. So I'm going to copy this and put it right over there. The reason I'm copy pasting is just because I think it'll prevent mistakes. And here, last but not least, let's call this edited image URL. And I'm going to return that from the function. Now let's test the backend function. I always like to do it in this form where I first build the backend, test it, and make sure it's working before I move to the front end. Otherwise, we just create a lot more complexity and kind of prevent our ability to effectively identify bugs and solve them. So let's go ahead and run this backend function. And for the image URL, I will be using this image over here, which I already uploaded to my Wix Media. And it doesn't look like it, but this white area that you see here is actually transparent. And I will copy it over and put it here for the image URL. Then we will need to write out a prompt. I'm going to try and turn this picture into something a little more wizard-like that is more appropriate for the Wix Wiz. So I'm going to say a wizard who is looking at a great website. I don't know, something like that. And let's hit run over here to see what the AI API returns. And it failed with a status code of 400. So let's go and check that out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. And here, I have a feeling it might have to do with this mask, because even though inside of the API it said we don't have to pass the mask, it could be that this create image edit is expecting that mask anyways. What I'm going to try and do is I'm just going to try and pass null here instead of mask. So let's just go over here and I'm going to pass null, because it could be that if it's expecting 4 parameters and it's getting 3, then it thinks that the prompt is actually the mask and everything is in the wrong place. So I'm going to be passing null here instead. And let's go back and try and run this one more time. So I'm going to go and clear the output and run. Null or undefined when calling create image edit. So I wonder how I'm supposed to pass a mask. Okay, let's go over here. Transparent area of the mask should indicate where the image should be edited. Okay, so I actually have an idea for a solution, even though the solution here is not so clear. And that is because the parts of my original image are transparent in some places, then I can actually just pass that image as both the original image and the mask. And I think that that should work. So that's going to be a little creative, but let's see if that works. So I'm going to go over here, back to here, and I'm just going to pass in my buffer twice. Let's head back here to edit image, and I'm going to click run. And it's not throwing an error, which is already somewhat promising. And here we go. Okay, we got something back. Moment of truth. And head into the browser. And okay, I don't see anything wizard-like about this image, but the AI did work. It did switch out the transparent area for something. My main issue here is that I'm not so good at prompts, I guess. But in terms of running and calling the API, this worked. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get this working from the front end as well. So I'm going to head back to the editor and go over here. And one small adjustment I'm going to make before we head to the front end is that I'm going to use our get downloadable URL function again. So I'm going to put that right over here. And instead of image URL, we're going to pass in file URL to our function. So now let's head to the front end of our website. So I'm going to go back to home. And here on the home page, I have basically copied the setup from the variants. So we have an original image, we have the edited image, and the only change here is that we also have an input for our prompt, because if you remember, we need to pass in an image and possibly a mask and a prompt of what we want this new image to look like. And now we can go ahead and start to build the front-end code. And I'm going to be basing it mostly off of the variant code. Again, there might be a way to refactor this if you were trying to build a complete application so that the code is not used twice. but because I'm treating each of these mini tutorials as its own project, I'm just going to copy the code completely. So let's zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to copy all of this code, which we were using for the variants. And I'll try and re-explain it just in case you kind of skip the variants part. But over here, we have a function which is going to upload the image to Wix once we have selected it from our computer. And I'm just going to change this to say edit. So we know this is the function for the editing and not the one for the variants. And I'm going to change it here as well. Now I just have to change everything to the respective elements that I named for this part of the tutorial, which is instead of upload image button, so we have upload edit button. And here, instead of original image, we have original edit image. And instead of generate variant button, we have generate edit button. And these are pretty much the same respective buttons, and I'll point them out, respective elements as we had in the variants version. Here we have the upload edit button. Here we have the generate edit button. And here we have the edited image. And here we have edited image. And one last thing that we need to do is we need to import the edit image function from our backend. And we're going to call it here instead of the generate variant function. So this is going to be edit image. And if you remember here, except for the file URL, we also need to pass in the prompt. So this prompt is something that we are going to get from the text box that we have right over here. So this is going to be equal to edit prompt input dot value. Okay, so that should be enough to get everything going. And let me just point out the elements to you. So here we have our original edit image. This is our edited image. This is our upload edit button, and this is our generate edit button. So very similar to what we had in the variants. And let's go ahead and head into preview mode. And I'm going to select the image first. So I'm going to select the Wix transparent, which is what I showed you in the testing of the backend code. And we see that that is uploaded successfully. Now, what do I want this image to be of? Let's see if I can create a slightly better prompt. So a man with a wizard hat and a wand creating a website on a laptop. Let's see if that makes a slightly better image. And I'm going to go ahead and click generate. And let's see if we have any joy here. So our image URL came back, and here is our new Wix wizard. So I see here that they even gave me slightly more of a beard here, I think, on the bottom. I do have my Wix wizard hat and some kind of poster nearby. I guess that's a laptop. But basically, this worked, and the AI managed to generate an image for the transparent areas based on my prompt. Again, you might want to add kind of some loading animations and stuff like that, just so the user doesn't freak out why his image isn't showing yet, just like I almost did. But that is the first step for editing images without a mask. And now I will show you how we can do this with a mask file. So for the mask demonstration, we're going to be doing it really simple. And I'm really just trying to show you principles which you can later use to create more complex things for your own project. And what I'm going to be doing is I uploaded an image to Wix, and I'll show you that image right here now inside of the Media Manager. And it's just a black square PNG. And if I go ahead and check out that image, then we see that we have the option to crop and edit. And I'm basically going to take advantage of the Wix editing tools in order to make part of this image transparent. And my principle is that I will provide a pre-made mask for my users to use for their own images. Think of ways of expanding this. For example, could be to provide 10 different masks that people can choose from. Obviously, you want to also consider giving people the option to upload their own masks or go so far as to develop a software which lets people create a mask on your website. But really, I just want to show the principles of how to use the API. So I'm going to go ahead over here to cutout. I'm going to go auto cutout, and this is going to erase my entire image. But if I go here to refine cutout, then I can use the brush to restore parts of the image. So I'm just going to kind of go around here, and I'm going to just restore parts of the image. And I'm just going to leave kind of a maybe slightly sloppy transparent circle in the middle. And again, if I was making a set of masks, maybe I would make different size circles. Maybe I make them in different areas of the image. And I'm going to go ahead and click apply. So as you can see here, this basically created an image for me, which is transparent in the middle. So that's the part of the image that will be switched out. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now I'm going to link this middle new image that I created, which I named mask image, to that image. So I'm going to go ahead and change image, and I'm going to put my mask here instead. So again, here I'm giving the user only one mask that they can use, but think you can have a drop-down which lets people select different images through a collection or something along those lines. Now what we need to do here is in the front-end code, I'm going to change it up a bit. So here in the edit image, I am going to pass two things. I'm going to pass three things actually. The file URL of the uploaded image, the prompt, but I'm also going to add the mask file URL. And the way I'm going to get the mask file URL is just by tapping into the source property of that mask image element. Source. So this will give us a URL very similar to this file URL. And then in the back end, we can use our downloadable URL function in order to turn this into something that the AI can understand as well. So let's head to our back end. And I'm going to change our edit image functions to include also a mask file URL, let's call it, same language. And then here we have our image URL, which is the await get downloadable URL file URL, and I'm just going to copy that over. Sorry, I know I talk a little fast sometimes. And this is going to be our mask URL. And our mask URL will be here instead. This will be our mask file URL. Let me zoom in a little bit just so you can see better. And I forgot a comma up here. Excellent. So now we have two URLs, and we're going to need to create two buffers. So this is our image, and this will be our image buffer, and this will be image buffer name, and here we're going to pass in the image buffer. And then we're going to do the same thing for our mask. So I'm going to go over here and say here that mask should be equal, and here this is going to be our mask URL. And this is going to be our mask buffer. And this is going to be mask buffer.name. I'm just going to change this just in case so that these two are different. And here we're going to pass in our mask buffer. Okay. I would also recommend adding some, split this code up a little bit so it's a little easier to see. And I would also recommend adding a condition here so that if there is no mask file URL, then we pass in our file URL. So what I'm going to say here is that, let's say mask URL equals, okay, so we're going to separate this like this. I'm going to put this over here. This is all in one place. And I'm going to say if mask URL. Okay, so this means that mask URL is not undefined and it's not null. Then we should do all of this. Sorry, not if mask URL, if mask file URL. Okay, so that means this is not undefined, it's not null. Then this I had forgotten to change to mask. Very good. Okay, and then else, I'm going to say that mask buffer equals to image buffer. And for that to work correctly, I'm going to need to say over here, let mask buffer and here this will be like this. Okay, so let me just recap what I did here. I kind of collected all of the mask related functions and put them into an if statement. And this if statement is basically saying that if we pass a mask URL, like we are a mask file URL, like we are now, then it should generate a buffer for that mask and pass it to our API. If we did not pass it a mask, that basically indicates, okay, we want to use the original file as the mask, and then it will just say that the mask buffer should be the same as the image buffer, which is what we showed in the first example. And let's try this out. So what I'm going to do is I am going to zoom out and head into preview mode. And for this demonstration, I'm going to be uploading our previous wizard image that we had generated from AI earlier in the tutorial. And this is because I want an image that is a full image because we're using the mask principle now. So this mask should be applied, which means basically this area should be kind of blocked out. This is the area that we can change with the AI. So I'm going to say a wizard with an elephant face. Okay, so in my mind, what should happen now is that this face should be switched out for an elephant. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to go ahead and click generate here. And this took some time, remember, from before. And we're doing kind of twice as much as we were doing. So think of your favorite song and hum along, or maybe I could think of a good knock-knock joke while this is kind of working itself out. Request failed with status code 400. Excellent. So let's see if we have anything in the logs. So about half an hour of debugging later, I finally discovered that the issue was that we had an invalid input mask because the size of the mask needs to be 512 by 512, and we had inserted 500 by 500. So I went ahead to Canva and I adjusted the size of the mask, uploaded it to Wix, and I connected our image on the home page back to the new mask. And now we're going to try this all again. Just to recap what our backend function looks like. So I'm just going to zoom out. And here I had been playing around with a lot of different things. So I'm going to go ahead and just erase all of this extra stuff that I had added for the debugging process and make sure that our function is ready. So we want to use these downloadable URL calls over here. And for this, we can get rid of. And I threw everything into a try catch just so we have some better error handling. As we see, we kind of need it. And I removed the conditional if statement that I had talked about earlier. That's something that I might add back in later on as I'm polishing off this project. But since I really just want to get the editing with the masks working, I decided to take it out for now. It would also just help me simplify the debugging process. So now this backend function should be fully functional and ready to create an image using an image and a mask. And I'm just going to test it one more time in the backend. So I'm going to click this run button. And as you can see here, I have already put 2 images over here. But this image is actually my old mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to the front end of the website. Let's zoom out. And I'm just going to add a console over here. So I'm going to say console.log. And I'm going to select the mask image element and say .source. And this should give me that kind of image file that we can use for testing the backend. So I'm going to go ahead and preview that. And here we have that image file. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that over, head back to edit site, head to the edit image backend testing and change the file out right over here. And now you can see here, origin width 512, origin width height 512, so excellent. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And these things take time. The AI needs to think. And I'm hoping here now that, as we can see here, we returned a URL. And this URL is an image that was generated by the AI using the mask. Excellent. So now let's just implement this on our front end, which is basically just testing because we already had written out all the code beforehand. So I'm going to go to the front end and I'm going to click preview. And I'll just zoom out a little bit because I see it's kind of distorted. Go all the way down here. Okay, so first of all, I don't see my mask file, which is kind of worrying me. Zoom out one more. Okay, so here I should be seeing my mask file. So I'm going to head back to Add Site. And I see here that for some reason my image was collapsed. So I'm going to uncollapse that because I do want to see the mask. And I'm going to head back into preview mode. And I'm going to add a file. So this is going to be just like before. It's going to be that wizard image that we had created earlier. And I already have my mask preset over here. So I'm just going to define what I want to see. So I want to see a wizard with an elephant face, like we wanted to see before. And then I'm going to go ahead and click generate. And hopefully on the right here, soon we should see an AI generated image with a wizard with an elephant face instead of a human face. And it's coming along. Okay, it's definitely different. I would not say it's an elephant by any means. I think that the mask maybe is not sitting in the perfect place for this kind of change. And as I said, this is really just demonstrating how to use a mask, but you can as I said, either provide different kinds of masks for your users or encourage them to create their own masks and upload them separately. But I think that if you've watched through this entire tutorial, you should have all the tools that you need in order to generate your own DALL-E clone or AI image generator if you want to keep it more generic. I really hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please share your own projects in the comments below or any questions that you have, either in the comments or in my forum on my website. Feel free to reach out if you need a developer to work on any projects or if you're interested in purchasing the final version of this site, which I will be touching up a little bit and improving on as a template. And I'll see you next time.